All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. Errol Spence Jr. is a better boxer than Terence Crawford, and Terence Crawford will not be able to out-slick him in that ring, according to Adrien Broner, who has sparred Errol Spence Jr. and a former world champion. Let's talk about that in this video, but before we do that, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you are new to the channel, please accept my invitation to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos. And if you are a long-time subscriber and supporter, thank you so much for your continued support. But before we get into that, I just want to tell you real fast about today's sponsor, the Boxing Showtime app. It's a very useful app that keeps you updated on all things boxing, and you can keep up with the latest fights, where to watch them, the latest news, and a lot more. For any hardcore boxing fan like myself, and most likely all of y'all, I would definitely recommend downloading it. And it also is most definitely a big support to the channel. It's available for both Apple and Android, and you can find the link in the description below. Thanks for considering downloading Boxing Showtime's app. But let's get back into the subject matter of the video. All right. So, as you know, we got the big fight coming up before too long, which is the Errol Spence Jr. versus Terence Crawford fight, which will be taking place on July 29th in Las Vegas. And up until that time, people are going to be asking the question and wondering who's going to win the fight. And people have different opinions, but we got a very interesting opinion coming from Adrien Broner, the former lightweight 140 and 147 pound champion, who talked about something that Errol Spence Jr. is very underestimated in for some strange reason, and that is his boxing ability. Many people think Terence Crawford is going to be able to box circles around Errol Spence Jr., that he has a bunch of different weapons and more things at his disposal, is more versatile, and as a result will be able to outbox Errol Spence Jr., and at the same time think that Errol Spence Jr. is just a come-forward, flat-footed fighter who is going to be getting picked off on his way in, picked off in his way in while he's in the pocket, and when he gets out of the pocket, getting picked off up there as well. And look, man, let me tell you, it's really interesting, man, how we used to hear a lot in boxing commentary about people having Olympic pedigrees, and how you knew when somebody had an Olympic pedigree, they know how to box, because the way that amateur boxing goes is that it is most definitely hit and do not get hit. You have 3 minutes, right? And it is on a point system, so you only score points for clean and effective shots, and right, and so. And in order to do it, you got to get through a lot of tournaments. You got to get through local tournaments. You got to get through Golden Gloves. You have to get through national tournaments. You have to get through international tournaments. You got to get through the Olympic trials. So the idea that somebody can make it up into the Olympics without having a solid fundamentals in the sport of boxing, it doesn't happen that often. And you would constantly hear this on telecasts at ESPN whenever they would bring in somebody like Vasily Lomachenko, who was an Olympic champion, or somebody like Guillermo Rigondeaux, or pretty much the Cubans, or anybody pretty much that were very successful in the Olympics. So when Adrien Broner said, "Look, man, I've sparred Errol Spence Jr., it ain't that easy to outbox him," right? It brought to my mind this exact scenario, that you have a guy that is an Olympic quarterfinalist in Errol Spence, a guy that is a multi-time national champion in the amateurs, right, and was one of the best amateurs in the world, and became that by boxing, right? Also, sometimes people talk about, when Errol Spence Jr., what he did with Mikey Garcia and how he wasn't able to knock out Mikey Garcia. What a lot of people don't understand, though, is that Errol Spence Jr. was able to thoroughly outbox Mikey Garcia. And Mikey Garcia was considered to be somebody that was one of the best boxers, technically skilled, fundamentally sound fighters in the world. But Errol Spence Jr. outboxed him for 12 rounds in a one-sided fight. So I think what you see when you see Errol is people obsessing over the fact that he will walk you down and break you down and try to stop you that way. However, even within that, there's a lot of very subtle, and there's a lot of subtle movements there. He's not just coming in head first, boring in. He's coming in behind the punch that people say is the most important punch in boxing, and that's the jab. And Errol Spence Jr., if you had to compare who has the more effective jab between Errol Spence and Terence Crawford, I would suspect that you'd have to say it was Errol Spence Jr. who works it, most definitely has a stick jab. Now, that's not to say, again, for everybody that calls every video that you talk positively about Errol Spence Jr. as a Terence Crawford hate video, that's not saying that Terence Crawford cannot box, that Terence Crawford is not an excellent fighter. However, if you do look at the pedigree of the fighters, you say, okay, well, who was the Olympian and who was not? Who really does work behind a jab and has the more, fundamentally sound and the more fundamental base to their boxing? You'd have to say it was Errol Spence. Terence Crawford is the one that throws more wide punches. He loads up on his punches more so than Errol Spence Jr. does, when Errol Spence Jr. is pretty much a scoring machine. He's somebody that throws as much as 20 more punches per round than Terence. He throws 20 punches more punches per round than Terence Crawford does. He lands at about at the same percentage that Terence Crawford does, but with a higher volume. It's going to be very difficult for Terence Crawford to outbox and outscore Errol Spence Jr. in that fight. I've said, and I'm going to continue to say, that the best shot for Terence Crawford in that fight against Errol Spence Jr. is for him to be able to get a knockout. That's what I think the best opportunity is for him to win. I don't see him beating him and out punching him, outscoring him. Right now, Freddie Roach came in and said that he believed that Errol Spence Jr. was going to be in a very, for a long night with Terence Crawford, and how he had advised Manny Pacquiao to stay away from Terence Crawford. Look, man, Manny Pacquiao was going to have a deathly night up in there with Errol Spence Jr. if he had gotten in that ring at the point in time when those guys were supposed to fight. But, it is what it is, man. Like I said, the fight can go either way. I've got Errol Spence Jr. winning a decision. I don't think this is some scenario where it's going to be a blowout for either guy. And I just think that the biggest misestimation of this whole thing is that for some reason people think that Errol Spence Jr. is not a very good boxer. He's an excellent boxer, and has showed that in the ring on multiple occasions. He can also is somebody that will go to town with you and will step to you, will try to get you out of there. And if the combination of that boxing and being very, very aggressive with Terence, I just think Terence is going to have to land one of those big left hooks on him and be able to stop Errol. But I just don't know if that's going to take place because of the level of competition that Terence Crawford has fought and been able to pull that off against. I don't think is the same thing as Errol Spence Jr. And just the biggest thing for me is the lower level of competition that he's been fighting. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.